Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Well, Ramzan Kadyrov is a man of action. He gets things done. And he called for some troops, some mobilization in provinces around Russia. And it was about a few days ago when he said, we need to chip in. So how about you guys send about 1,000 fighters as volunteers from each region, and we're going to get to about 90,000 people, according to him, and we can go and support Russia. All right? It seems like his calls were heard. This article comes from the Moscow Times, from September 16th, actually. So Russian governors back Kadyrov's call to self-mobilize residents for Ukraine deployment. So the governors of Russia's far-flung regions are taking up a call issued by the Chechen counterpart to mobilize volunteer fighters as the country's military suffers major setbacks in the northeastern and southern Ukraine. Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov called on his colleagues to self-mobilize 1,000 fighters each and send an 85,000 strong army to Ukraine nearly 7 months after Russia invaded its pro-Western neighbor. Remember, it was not a pro-Western neighbor when Yanukovych was in 2014, remember? And then the Western made sure that Ukraine becomes a pro-Western country by helping I would call them, they're obviously not terrorists, but traitors. Because if you overthrow a legitimate, democratic elected government with the help of outside services and support, that would get you, you meet the definition of a traitor. And you know what happens to traitors? Well, that happened in 2014. Yanukovych was out and the pro-Western governments came in. All right, so we got that covered. And I'm quoting, Russia is a federal state where regions can initiate any undertaking such as self-mobilization, Kadyrov wrote on his Telegram channel. He should, and I'm quoting, we shouldn't wait for the Kremlin to declare martial law or sit back and wait for the end of the campaign in Ukraine, end quote. 3 governors from Russia's 85 regions have expressed full support for Kadyrov's initiative in the 24 hours since his call to action. Sergei Asyonov, head of the Crimean Peninsula that was annexed from Ukraine in 2014, was the first to back Kadyrov's boasting that his region has fielded more than 1,200 volunteer fighters and is forming 2 more battalions. And I'm quoting, we're fully providing them with combat uniforms, protective gear, communication and reconnaissance equipment, this guy said. Then he and Kadyrov are ranked the most and second most patriotic governors according to a list shared by the broadcaster RTVI, which said it was compiled and presented at the opening session of Russia's parliament Wednesday. That next to back Kadyrov's appeal for self-mobilization was Kursk region governor Roman Starovoit on the border with Ukraine. So he said that placed the number of local volunteers already deployed on the battlefield at 800 and said more residents are being recruited to defend against a potential Ukrainian incursion. By Thursday, the head of the Magadan region in Russia's Far East, which independently estimates say has the 3rd smallest population and some of the lowest troop deaths in Ukraine, became the 3rd governor to express support for Kadyrov's self-mobilization plan. Magadan region governor Sergei Nosov suggested, however, that Russian territory should pool together their resources based on their capabilities. The Kremlin has so far steered clear of declaring a politically risky nationwide mobilization to shore up its troops in Ukraine. So all this information confirms, I think, my assessment that actually the Russians are not fighting with the Russian army, but they're fighting with a volunteer army from different regions, including obviously the regions that are supposed to be liberated. And I think the Russian army per se is just providing organization of these troops, and obviously they are conducting the operation, and some troops must be of the Russian army. That's why I think when the Russians are now talking about really once we get these regions, these territories incorporated into Russia, with the referendum that's going to be from the 23rd to 27th on September, I just made a video on that a minute ago, then any attack on these regions will be an attack on Russia. Therefore, according to Medvedev, the former Russian president and prime minister, we can defend ourselves with full force of the Russian army. That means right now they're not employing the 1 million people which are in the army. If they were, I think the Ukrainians would be pushed to wherever. And the reason why, and I'm saying this again over and over again, the Russians did not employ their full military force is because they want to minimize the losses, so they have calm and tranquility in their society and Moscow and economic and all that. So that's why. So the Russians are just using the bare minimum, I think, and use the ones involved to fight their war, which is the Luhansk, Donetsk, Donbass, Zaporozhye, all those, they fight their war, and Russia is just providing military equipment and logistics and personnel at the bare minimum. Now, that's how I think it is based on all the information that I received as of now. I find it hard to believe that Russia employed 1 million people to fight against Ukraine and could not move on. And that also comes as a fact to support my claim that at the beginning of the operation, and that's why they call it a special military operation, which by definition should be smaller than a war, is because it's not a war with the whole army. It's a special operation. That's one, but terms are terms. It's one thing I can call this a pistol, and it's glasses or spectacles. So anyway, that's one thing. And the other thing is, according to British, US and Ukrainian information reports, the Russian army at the border, or that was employed in all this, was no more than 160,000 people or something like that, not even 200,000. And then Ukrainians say, well, we killed about 50-some thousand Russians. Well, I think most of them were killed from the regions here. That's why it's calm and okay in the country over there. But we'll find out. I think they will obviously annex these regions. The Ukrainians will continue to shell them, and maybe Russia will put another button and say, okay, now go and them up. But we'll see. Maybe, I don't think Russia doesn't have the capability. It's just doing it calculated and minimum energy employed. That minimum resources, so will be minimum losses for Russia. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.